But I also want to take this opportunity just briefly to remember Harriet Nahanee, who stood with me at Eagleridge Bluffs and who died a few days after she was released from prison. I want to remember a lot of things. I want to remember all of the protests that we have done in the past to try to preserve the environment, to try to preserve the right to protest. And this is what is happening here today, is that the Crown Counsel through the Attorney General's office is saying that we no longer have a right to protest. If you protest and if you keep protesting, we will lock you away forever. And we will use a process called the summary process that it will ensure that you won't have a jury trial. I could be locked away forever. And according to what the Attorney General is suggesting this morning through their case law, without ever having a jury trial, without ever having access to the criminal code in order to defend myself, they don't have to prove anything when they bring you to court on a summary code. All they have to say is you were there, you're guilty, you're going to jail. This is unfair, and I've come to the conclusion it is illegal. They simply cannot do this to the citizens of British Columbia.
I'm also here because there are many women in this community who benefited and learned and grew stronger under Harriet Nahanee's leadership, under her mentoring, under her partnership, under her love. I'm astounded and I'm beside myself today because the courts would actually allow Crown to use a case of a pedophile as an argument to lock up Betty. Betty is a woman that has stood with us as Native women who have organized for protection against men who are pedophiles, who harm our children in the homes and in the streets. Betty has stood with us as we fight for our rights to defend ourselves and protect our children and our lands.
While the rest of us have lived, for the most part, our comfortable lives and been content to watch events unfold on television, Betty has repeatedly put herself on the line for what she believes strongly is the common good. And I think for those actions, for her putting her very liberty at stake time and time again, she deserves all of our thanks and support. And it's important to realize that she was not prosecuted under the Criminal Code of Canada. She was not charged with breaking any law. Rather, the process that led to her arrest and conviction arose from the fairly benign act. She and Harriet Nahanee sat or stood on a piece of public land in symbolic opposition to the construction crews that were about to lay waste to it. And that benign act, which wasn't prosecuted as a breach of the law, happened to be disobeying what a judge had earlier told her and others not to do. And because she didn't do as she was told, the courts came down on her and came down on her very hard indeed. She ended up serving more time in jail than people who actually hurt others in the commission of serious crimes often spend in jail. And this process, I've got to be careful about what I say about it, but this process is in fact, in my view, an abuse of the court system. Betty will have a chance today to say as much as she can about that process when she appears before 3 justices of the Court of Appeal. And for my part, although I can't be there beside her, I'll be with her in spirit and emotionally, and I wish her nothing but the greatest success in continuing to get her message out. So thank you again.
This, I think, really is a day of infamy. And it's brought on, make no mistake about it, by the Campbell Government and the Attorney General. This is not a decision that sort of happened along down a river on a piece of bark. This has been thought out and it's deliberate, and it's intended to cow us, and that cannot be allowed to happen. Betty's courage tells us the fear that Pinocchio Campbell has of the people. I've been around a while. I've seen a lot of governments. I've seen a lot of politicians, and I've been a politician, and I've been a member of government. But I have never, ever seen anything like these lying bastards. They're in a class by themselves. Well, I've got to tell you that if what this government plans for our rivers and our streams and our farmland, if they continue with that, Betty will not be alone in the big slammer. There'll be a hell of a lot of other people all around this province that are going to protest in the same way, with Betty as their leader. We now have to take united action, ladies and gentlemen, and I suggest we start this right now, today, in honor of our hero, Betty Krawczyk. Thank you very much.
And we have to come together. There is something terribly, terribly wrong with a world that puts beautiful, community-committed, environmentally committed women like Harriet Nahanee and Betty in jail, and lets the crooks who are stealing our rivers and our land and our water and our communities and destroying our communities make them rich and elect them to office and allow them to run our governments. We have to take back our power.
We absolutely believe that non-violent civil disobedience is a way to right the wrongs of this world. Betty has stood in nonviolent civil disobedience to protect our planet and our children's future. And we cannot believe that the Attorney General, Crown Counsel, is likening her stand to the criminal, violent activities of pedophiles. It's beyond us to understand how they can draw any parallel. We absolutely believe that Betty should be given honors and accolades by our society, not jail time. Thank you very much.
That's just absurd. I mean, what Betty did was to stand on a piece of land and say, this is not to be touched. This was the same with myself, and as it happened, I was arrested and I had to serve 250 hours of community service. But I think Betty is to have this association with the pedophile situation is totally out of line and is disgraceful. That's all I can really feel of saying.
The use of clubs and pepper spray and violence by the state is something that in peace we say we will not tolerate. Good people, see what's going on. Find power in the word. The right to speak for what is right. Our right is to be heard.